just when you thought the dollar, maybe someone would go easy on it for a day, this was pretty stunning that I saw yesterday. African leaders to debate using China's yuan as reserve currency.
The land of Arcadia.
Hello there, my friends. Chris Marcus here with you on Tuesday, June 5th for an early version of this week's market wrap-up. I'll be traveling later this week, although there's plenty already happened since the last couple days. So let's dig in quickly, keep you posted on what's going on, what is relevant to know about in the markets this week. Of course, last week covered the Deutsche Bank downgrade, which will be fascinating to see how that unfolds as time moves forward, specifically because the concern is that the downgrade may trigger a credit event that could affect a massive derivatives book that Deutsche Bank holds, which, again, we've seen the interconnected nature of the banks and the degree to which, for example, right now, the Italian bonds are going bad, but a lot of the banks hold these bonds. So if things get worse, that's also problems for the banks. And certainly Deutsche Bank, not in great shape these days. So we'll see how that plays out. But on to the new news. China's President Xi Jinping says blockchain part of new technological revolution. And as Bix Weir pointed out on his channel today, gone are the threats of, is China going to just ban cryptos? But here is Xi Jinping openly praising blockchain technology. And as I felt that China does seem to be embracing it, and more focused on cleaning up the corruption within. And by all means, there are plenty of scams in the crypto space, and I don't expect that to change. I don't know if the top 100 cryptos in market cap, are 50, 70, 90 of them junk. I don't know. I think there's a great case to be made for the ones that have legitimate business models, of which Litecoin and Veritasium are my two favorites. I'm guessing it's probably not as high as 90, but with the point being that, yes, there are great opportunities in the cryptos. There's also a lot of stuff that will likely take the same path of which pets.com being the example in the internet bubble, where when everything was moving, yes, these will move up. But if you actually pick good companies that have legitimate business use, or perhaps read about how China is using that and see which coins are more than just a fad, or as it was in the case in BitConnect, an outright Ponzi scheme. So want to be careful, but again, here's the the country that has the builds all the stuff, and now what are they using? They're going to cryptos. So I'll leave that up there if you want to take a look at that article. And now I'll take it down because we're going to move on to the next one. But interesting story. LME plans to launch Yuan-denominated metals future. This would certainly be a fascinating one. Again, if you've been watching this channel for any period of time, I feel the precious metals are heavily manipulated because banks write a lot of paper and gold paper contracts that say we're going to sell this metal, although I would dispute that they have the ability to actually deliver the metal. So I continue to hear numbers as high as 500 to 1, how many paper claims there are for each physical ounce of metal. And this would be a big step if China actually basically starts taking control away from the COMEX and moving it onto their system, similar to what happened with the PetroYuan, which has started cutting into the market share of the petrodollar. And what's interesting is that we're a couple months in now, and shares of yuan contracts in global trading jumped to 12% compared to 8% in March. and 14% of WTI volume, up from 2% in April. So seems as if the adoption is actually taking place. Should something like that happen with a yuan-backed precious metals contract, it would be fascinating to see how the COMEX is able to function. Certainly another event that has the potential to bring that manipulation to the end. There's so many moving parts out there, any of which could be the spark. As soon as I see one that is developed far enough that we're there, of course, I'll be happy to share that with you. But you know, it's rather clear where these things are headed. You know, now to me, it's a matter of when as opposed to if. So the nice part is you can just sit there and feel comfortable owning cryptos or metals if you've selected good ones. Oh, and just when you thought the dollar, you know, maybe someone would go easy on it for a day, this was pretty stunning that I saw yesterday. African leaders to debate using China's yuan as reserve currency. And basically, bankers and officials from 14 nations will discuss the viability of using China's yuan as a reserve currency for the region. Certainly, the PetroYuan was a big story. The yuan-backed precious metals contract were to follow a similar trajectory and an adoption as the PetroYuan, that would be a big story. But here, we're now talking about central bankers and government officials from 14 nations discussing the use of the yuan as a new reserve currency, which to me is really taking things into another level, because you're openly talking about alternatives to the dollar as the reserve currency, which certainly, again, as many of these things have existed for a while, you know, it's not a surprise, but to actually see that, that seems like a big step to me, that openly being discussed. And I actually asked a friend of mine about that today, what he thought, and his response was, I wonder if we'll see military action in Africa soon. Let us only pray that's not the case, but, you know, we're not talking about being galaxies away from this end of the dollar anymore. So certainly a rather stunning story here, and we'll keep an eye on that one. Quick look at the markets today. The 10-year Treasury note in the US had rallied quite a bit after spiking over 3%. Then with the Italian news, the yields crashed as people bought treasuries in the, what I would assert is mislabeled flight to safety. Either case, yields were below 2.8 last week. As you can see, they're rising back up again. And for the most part, I would say would continue to do so, except I don't think by any means the European turmoil is done. Nothing's been resolved. So were that not presently the case, then perhaps you'd see a more steady climb, because remember, the Fed's raising rates, supposedly not buying the bonds. Written about China stepping away from the auction. Appears Japan has been doing the same as well. So normally you would think yields would be rising, although be prepared, there you could wake up any morning and there's a headline about Deutsche Bank or the Italian bonds, and then you see a flight into the Treasury. Although at some point you're going to see the same flight out of the U.S. Treasury, because their debt is even more toxic than what you see in Europe when you just look at it as a percentage of GDP, especially if you factor in the unfunded liabilities like Social Security and Medicare, which apparently, according to the Wall Street Journal, I saw a report earlier today that we're now hit a deficit on that. So either case, U.S. financing not much better, but hopefully that points out the dynamic that you will see at some point. It might not matter what happens in Europe when the dollar and the treasury market in the US finally break. I expect it to crash hard, and it's going to be fascinating. Again, I don't like to be careful not to say that because to the degree people are affected by the things that are going on, you want to take that seriously. Although just from the studying the historical perspective and studying the science of trading, certainly fascinating events that are taking place. And fortunately, I do believe that without the dollar system, you would have a much better way of life for everybody. So while there may be an adjustment, I do think we'll come out better on the other side. So there we go. There's my disclaimer. And as you can see, silver still being blocked by a pop-up ad, and now that that's gone, is trading about $16.50. And our chart has disappeared here again, but still basically at what it costs to get it out of the ground. So not much changing in gold and silver this week, except that if you are looking for a way out of this sinking dollar, both the silver and gold markets are at good levels. And then lastly, you can see the crypto markets here up a little bit in the last 24 hours, still been sitting in the same range for a couple of weeks, maybe over a month now. Hearing a lot of the folks in the crypto crowd wonder if we're going to start seeing a pickup in the action, especially over the next couple weeks and months. I continue to hear a lot of informed speculation, whatever you want to label that, that would indicate the second half of this year will be quite wild. Let me put it like this in terms of, I'll label that things I can't prove, although to the degree that I attempt to focus more on intuition than overthinking things these days, I think there's a good chance that that is the case, and that the second half of the year will be a fascinating one for cryptos, with the prices being, I would say that I expect prices to be, for the cryptos, to certainly be above last year's December and this year's January highs. So if, and even forget what's the rumors or speculation, just you see one system dying, as we covered in the first half of this video, and then you see the replacement, you see what China is doing. So however you want to look at it, it's certainly a lot to indicate reason for optimism. So with that said, going to wrap up for today. Thank you as always for watching. Hit the thumbs up button below. And with that said, I hope you have a great weekend, and I will see you next week. Thanks.